All right, folks, in this tutorial, we are going to learn about the numeric comparator, and we're going to bring together all that we've learned to make sense of responsive design, making one great responsive design of our own. Now, if you're following along with me in the comps here, there are two. There's the final and the start. Make sure you are on the start to follow along with me. The final is the completed version. So I have here these motion design awards. We have this 3D statue that rotates around like this, and it looks pretty good. But as we change the aspect ratio, let's say to vertical HD, even though we learned about how to control the scale a little bit of different layers, this just does not look good. Motion awa, that is not what we want. The statue's completely gone. So let's put it all together with Numeric Comparator and figure out how to make a good design at different orientations automatically. Now, this Motion Design Awards text layer, we got to talk about this a little bit. It's not as fun, but we got to understand the design challenge here before we can get into fixing it. We have this Motion Design Awards text here. It is one single logo. It's on the title.ping layer here. You can turn that on and off. See what that's doing there. It's all just on this one text layer. And this design works great when it's horizontal. I mean, it was born to be horizontal when you look at it, right? The orientation of this is horizontal, so it works great with this design, but vertically, it's just not going to be great. It would be too small down here. So we're going to have to turn this off when we shrink the composition. And I'll show you how to do that momentarily. But what I've done also here is created MDA text, kind of just like a little I tried to copy the font as best as I could. I didn't actually have it, but just kind of like a thin line font that's kind of classy. And when we go to a vertical or square orientation or something that's not completely widescreen like this, this is what I want to be on screen, is this MDA text. So let's first set this up, and I'll show you a trick I haven't covered in this series yet. If I go to the position of this text, I can go to the modifiers here and use this modifier that we've talked about already, push to comp edge. I want the horizontal alignment to be in the center, but I want the vertical alignment to be intermediate bottom. However, what I'm going to want to do also is put this statue in the center, and it's going to be too small and too cramped if I have the text up this high. So I want to lower the text. So we don't have too much flexibility, and I don't want to use a mount here because that might look different at different resolutions. I kind of want an absolute value for this. But there are no numbers here, so we can't use our good buddy, the math modifier, because there aren't any numbers to math right here. So what we need to do is add another modifier to the original position. I can do that by clicking the plus button here. That's probably the easiest way to do it. But just so this is a little bit more clear what's happening, I'm going to go back to the transform property, and then I could go to position, and this is where I'd want to add another modifier here. So I want to add an additional math modifier. So I'm going to select the math modifier. I do want to add to this, and I want to add just to the y value. So we have two values here. I've already figured out that it's -90 that I want. And that's about the position that I want for this text. Now we'll come back to this MDA text in a second. For now, I'm going to turn off its visibility, go down to this title.ping file. Now let's figure out how to remove this when we want it to scale down more. And the solution, as you might have guessed, is the numeric comparator. I'm going to select my layer and hit the letter V as in Victor to reveal the visible property for this layer. And we know from previous tutorials that I can click this off and turn this on and off here with this visible parameter. It's an on and off. I'm just going to delete the keyframe it made there. It's an on or off switch. It's not like opacity where there's degrees of it. It's either on or it's off. So with the visible parameter, we have additional modifiers and generators that we don't have other places. And one of them is the numeric comparator. So I'm going to select the generators here. I'm kind of mixing it up by doing this in the timeline, but of course we can do this here in the blend mode category in the properties. But I'm going to again select it over here and go to this generator icon, and I'm going to add numeric comparator. Now, I'm going pretty slow intentionally because this is kind of confusing and abstract for some people. For me, it is. Probably for other people, it's not, besides me, but it is for me. So basically what this is doing is it's utilizing the on-off nature of the visible property. And so basically, numeric comparator compares two numbers, A and B, using the condition set up in the operator dropdown. So if the condition is true, if A and B are compared in the way that the operator says, and it's true, as it is here, because by default it's A equals B, they're both set up to 0, so it's true. And if it is true, then visible is allowed to stay on. But if this is not true, then visible is turned off. So if I were to take A to any other number, for example, then it turns it off because it doesn't meet this condition anymore. Take that back to 0, meets the condition, it pops back on. Now, this is where so much of the power of responsive design lies, as we will see. What I'm going to do is for A, I'm not going to type a number here. I'm going to go to my generators and I'm going to choose composition info, as we looked at in the last tutorial. By default, it's set to width. Now I could go back to my visible property here, and you can see now that with this kind of darker blue background, that it's going to be using whatever the width of this composition is. And I can say, choose an option here like greater than or equal to B. Now, a lot of the square orientations, a lot of the designs here are below maybe like 1024, 1080, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to say for B, if this value, if the composition width goes below 1100, then this will be false. But because the current width is 1920, and that is greater than or equal to B, the 1100, it's allowed to stay on. So that's a pretty cool trick because it's dynamically using the width of the comp in this equation. But it gets even cooler if I right click on this and choose copy. Then I can go back to my MDA text and I could right click on its visible property. If it's not showing, you could just again hit the letter V as in visible to reveal it. I'm going to right click, I'm going to choose paste linked. So then it's dynamically linked with the Motion Design Awards text. If I go to vertical HD, they're both gone. That's what I want for right now. And then I can use our old buddy, the negate modifier. So I can go to the test tube here and use negate. And so basically then they can't be on at the same time. So I don't have to worry about greater than or equal to. I don't have to remember the exact numbers that I chose because basically whenever the title is on, then the MDA text is off and vice versa. So if I change this now to vertical HD, you see that we have the text exactly where we want it and when we want it. And we go back to HD and that text goes away and we're seeing the correct thing. Now, again, what I want to do with this statue here is that I want the statue for this design, let's say for the vertical design or a square design, I want the statue to be a little bit smaller and centered and maybe a little bit raised up from where it is. Well, there's some challenges here, folks, because with the statue, if I go to its position property, it's a 3D object. So it doesn't have the same ability, the same functionality available to align it to the composition. Same thing with modifiers. There's no push to comp edge here because this is a 3D object existing in 3D space. So what do? Well, this little trick I just showed you about numeric comparator and visible and negate and all that stuff, it really allows you to do anything because even if I don't know the right generators and modifiers to use to move this over, what I can do is just duplicate this layer and then on the duplicate make the changes. And so basically you can make any changes that you want using two different layers and this numeric comparator thing. For example, I'm going to select this. I'm going to hit the enter key. I'm going to rename this left statue, and then I'm going to select this and press Control or Command D to duplicate it. And then on the duplicate, I will rename this to center or just CTR just to move forward. And with this center one selected, I could manually zero out The position, I can raise it up. I can change the scale. Let's make it 0.02, I think is what we wanted to do there. And that looks pretty good. Maybe raise it up just a little bit more. There we go. So again, instead of having this be done with modifiers and generators automatically, if I don't know how to get to that point, I can always make a duplicate and use this numeric comparator visible negate trick. So now I could go back to title, hit V for visible, and I could right click again on that property. And I want this one over here, the left statue, to show up at the same time as that. So I can hit V and then right click on its visible and choose paste linked. Then I could do the same thing with the center, right click, choose paste linked. But for the centered statue, I want it to be negated, just like our MDA text. So I can go to the modifier here and choose negate. And it's just that easy. We now have a fully responsive design that is completely different based on our rules. So if I go to vertical HD, look at that, beautiful. If I go to square, look at that, beautiful. And all of this is dynamic. I don't have to go in and worry about this. If the client says, actually, I want this to be this different configuration, I can mess with it and figure that out. So we can adjust this and have it be dynamic when we render, and it will give us the design that works for us. And we did set that up very, very quickly and easily using these great tools in Autograph.